So I'm Nikki Shepherd, and I'm here at Farnborough Library with Ben Aaronovitch, the creator of the Rivers of London series. Urban sci-fi crime and fantasy series.
Urban sci-fi crime fantasy.
Urban sci-fi crime
You want
fantasy series.
to clam some more genres in there while we're at it. Romance. There's romances in it.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
Vaguely.
Which has sold over 5 million copies worldwide and been translated into 14 languages.
Yay!
So Ben is an award-winning writer. His career has spanned over 3 decades. I don't know how that's possible, including writing for Doctor Who and the cult soap opera Jupiter Moon.
That's such a generous way of describing Jupiter Moon. Cult suppose.
Ben famously said that it was while running the crime and science fiction sections at the Covent Garden branch of Waterstones that he conceived the notion of writing novels instead, a decision he hopefully doesn't regret. The novella Winter's Gift is the latest in his River of London series. Can we start by learning a little bit more about Winter's Gift from you, please, Ben?
Yes, it's Winter's Gifts, which is really hard to say. And
oh my God, I did that last bit again.
No, it's fine. It's fine because everyone gets it wrong and I get it wrong when I'm saying it too. The title just drove me nuts for about 2 weeks. And that was the best I could come up.
Oh, I'll have that one.
It's sometimes you know the title before you're going to start, right? And sometimes you don't know the title. You finish the book. And for example, Rivers of London was called not Midnight, right? That's the American title. It was called Magic Cops. That was its working title for 5 years, right? And it wasn't until we were literally, the publishers were going, look, we need a title for this book. And I was like, And my friend Andrew Cartmel said, call it Rivers of London. And I went, that's a terrible title, but it's better than anything I can think of. And now we're stuck with it.
I don't know. There's something about Magic Cops. I love it. It's just got that amazing 70s ring to it.
Well, it is.
Imagine Bodie and Doyle and all of those series.
It was essentially, the core of the idea was essentially, what if Gandalf joined the Sweeney, you see? But you can't use that as a pitch anymore because nobody knows who the Sweeney is, you see? But I was like, I wanted magicians that went around going, get your trousers on, you're nicked.
So did you know it was going to be set in winter then early on? Because the weather is a huge part of that.
Oh yeah, no, there are 4 novellas in this series and they're all set in a particular season. So you have The October Man, which is set in Germany during the autumn. You have What Abigail Did That Summer. And then this one, which is set in the winter, which I knew was set in the winter. And I was going for, and each of them is slightly different. Not only are they different side characters, the novellas were really my chance to explore some of the characters that weren't Peter in a way that wouldn't annoy my publishers too much. And I thought it'd be nice to give them a sort of thematic unity in case we had to combine them into one book or something and sell them and it would vaguely hang together. So I knew who every season was, and I wanted a slightly different style. So Abigail is vaguely YA-ish, even though it's not a YA book. October Man is very straight police procedural, and Winter's Gifts is my attempt at sort of vaguely horrifying. It's vaguely horror.
It is quite horrific.
Yeah, it's also written in the style of a horror thriller, although it's not actually a horror thriller. It's not horror. It's not horrific enough to be a proper horror book, and also you don't have the kind of existential dread that you get in a proper horror novel. So she's going to get out at the end. There's just no way she's not going to die. There's no real sort of excess threat. The world is not going to be destroyed. She's going to prevail. So the big distinction with a horror novel is you don't know that about your protagonist. Protagonists frequently don't survive horror stories.
That's true.
See, that's one of the big distinctions between a thriller and a horror story is that you do not know that they're going to make it through. They do not have plot armor. But I wanted it to have that kind of ambience rather than, so it was, you think of it as kind of horror ambience. Yeah,
and definitely now you've said that, the tension starts to build quite quickly, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it was designed as so you have first disturbance and then there's a bit of and then That's basically how you do a horror. Well, that's how I do a horror. I mean, obviously other people do it all the way around.
Until you'd mentioned the seasons, and it's crazy because I reread all of the books this summer, even before I knew you were coming to the library. They're my comfort read.
Oh, good.
They're one of the, and I reread them.
Be honest, you listen to the commoner versions, don't you?
Oh, well, I do both. Yeah. Actually, I mix and match. I listen to the audiobook and then I read when I'm walking my dog, and then I read the book I pick it up, which people think is really weird, but I...
No, you can do that. You've got this system now where you have like this thing where it's slaved to your Kindle account. You can just switch backwards and forwards. It's very handy.
Yeah. So, I just did it with the physical book because we've got all of your books from BorrowBox or the library app, so people can borrow them free. I hadn't ever put together the fact it's Abigail in the summer, October Man, and Winter's Gift until you explained that to me.
Yeah, and the next one's the spring.
So, that I hadn't even thought of that. But I suppose... in a way, because you are exploring a side character, I don't want to give away the ending for anyone who hasn't read the book, but obviously Agent Kimberly Reynolds, she could have died. Reynolds?
No, because actually the whole incident is referenced in one of the earlier books.
Oh, I didn't make that connection either.
No, I don't put these connections in. It's not vital to make these connections. I just like putting them in. It's like authors do that because for us, it takes like 12 months to write a book. You guys read it in like 3 days. It's like, and we like, so what we labor for a week writing, you guys doing like a day, no, not even a day, like an hour. An hour's reading for you is like a week's work. And so we delight in the little details like that, which we know that people often don't pick up. But it's just fun to put in. And then for people who do find them, it's like a fun thing.
It's like a little extra reward. For
it's like a little extra reward for diligence, for paying attention.
It's interesting because you sometimes quite public about your word count, aren't you? I've seen on the platform.
Yeah, when I'm working... when I'm working steadily, I publish my word count. At the moment, I'm doing so many different projects that the word count is meaningless because I'm doing several things at once. And when you're doing several things at once, you can't really publish a word count. Because half of that was for like essays or projects or notes on other people's things that I've had to do. So I once that's kind of calmed down, then we'll go back to having a word count when it's just the writing on the book. Then you get the word count. I am writing the book, but I'm having to fit it in between other projects at the moment.
So when you're able to focus on a book, like I think you said to me, the next novella, it was a really quick writing process for you. Yeah,
it just went really fast. Sometimes it goes fast.
So there's no this is the Ben Aaronovitch way. That it varies from project to project, book to book, whatever else is going on in your life.
Every time I start a book, I stare at that bloody screen and go, why is this not getting any easier? Why? You'd think 9 novels, right? 9 novels later, you'd think that it would get easier.
A whole world you've built.
But it's not even that. It's just, you just think the process of writing would get easier, but it doesn't. It's the same old bloody slog every single time, which I suppose is good because it means other people don't, you don't have to worry about competition so much. But it's you just do it. I mean, I just write. I like writing. It's not work. It's difficult. It's like, I always describe it like running a marathon. If you're not a professional runner, lots of people run the marathon. No one's paying them to run these marathons. In fact, they go out and they run these marathons and you think it's some bloody stupid thing to be doing. I mean, for a start, do they not remember that the guy died? Right? He arrives, we won, Humph, drops dead, right? That's the whole legend. Okay? Is that not a hint that maybe you shouldn't be doing 26 miles, okay? I think so, but never mind. But when you watch people running a marathon, I've never done it, but I've watched people doing it. You can see that, like, they go through stages, like, they're having a really good time. Then they feel, why did I think this was a good idea? And then it's like, then they go through a barrier and they're enjoying it. And you get to see them, they get to the end and they stop. And you can see this thought process, and it's just transparently on their faces. You can see their faces going, I'm never doing that again, right? That is the last time I bloody put myself through this. And then they lie down on the thing where you lie down after you've collapsed doing the run, right? Theatrically. And then you sit there and you go, if I start training now, I can do New York next year. And that's just like, you can just see that on their face. And that's what writing is like. You finish a novel and you think, why did I think that was a good idea? I am not doing that again. And then about 2 days later, your fingers start getting itchy.
So when you are writing, when you're in the midst of writing a novel, do you find that those characters start to inhabit, they come into your world? So you might be, for instance, making a cup of tea and you'll suddenly have a little piece of dialogue will pop up or a situation or something. Do they start to enter your world?
Not quite that distinctly. I always imagine there's like a green room behind my whiteboard, right? And they bang on the wall and demand parts. That's how I imagine my characters.
Oh, I can
and then they fight with you. You can't get something to work, and you go, "Why aren't you working?" And you can hear the muffled voice from the green room going, "Because I wouldn't do that in a million fucking years." You know, and like minor characters are constantly asking for bigger parts and stuff like that. But that's good. It's when the characters don't do that you're in trouble. When you write a character and they just flop on the ground and flip. That's when you're in trouble. I've had characters do that. You think they're going to be really interesting and they're really boring, and then their part gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and then you just cut it.
Oh, fascinating. So sometimes they never even make it to the final edit.
Some of them never make it to the final edit. Whole plot lines occasionally don't make it to the final edit. I was like, Moon Over Soho, I had to excise an entire plot line because it was just one plot too many.
Right.
You know, I do that less now because that's a waste of words.
You can see it coming. This is going to be a cul-de-sac.
One of the things you do get with the experience is seeing, oh, no, that's one too many plots. Let's not have that. Let's not do that.
So, Ben, we asked some of our social media followers for questions, and I know you shared the post too on your own channel, so thank you for that. So here we've got some questions from some of your fans.
Okay.
So Michelle has said, as an American who appreciates the footnotes written for Agent Reynolds, what exactly is a steak slice?
That's a good question. Steak slice is like a pastry with a meat filling. I mean, I assume it's got some kind of steak involved. I've never actually checked. Right?
Choice Descriptions Act.
Yeah. I mean, I assume it's probably got a bit of steak, and it's basically a meat pie. It's a meat pasty, and it's flat, and you get it from Greggs. That's basically. I mean, obviously you can get it from other places.
Other retailers do.
Other retailers may, but for me, like Greggs, it's a steak pasty. You know, steak slice. You go, oh, I have a steak slice and a nice bun and a cup of coffee.
So we know now that you've definitely eaten some as part of the research.
I think my research started long before I started writing the books in Greggs.
Beverly says, I'm addicted to the audio versions of these books. Did you have any input into the choice of narrator? Cobner Holbrook Smith is just perfect.
Oh, they sent me his. I mean, they said we're going to pick a narrator. I mean, they did it in a tearing hurry because they weren't planning to do one, and then the books were much more successful than they expected. And this was before books. Now, generally, you expect to have an audio version, but back then it wasn't so common. And they sent me his show reel. And I thought, oh, he's good. And then, off he went. And then I was just really lucky. I mean, I'm not very good at actors and performances. I've got a bit of a tin ear. So he's so popular. It's just embarrassing.
He's amazing the way he can bring we were talking about his Nightingale voice. You know, he brings Nightingale to life. He brings Beverly to life. He's very fun. He also brings quite a lot because there was the bit where I really started to appreciate him was Moon Over Soho. And there's a sequence where the Lord Grant's Irregulars, that's the jazz band, his dad's jazz band, who aren't his jazz band, but they're all sitting in the wonky having Chinese. And I thought it was quite a funny scene, but when he did it, it was really funny. It just added something to it, and it just came out much funnier than I wrote it. And I thought, aha, value added. So do you have to listen to them all before they're published? Do you listen to the audiobook?
Well, I'm supposed to contractually, yes, I've got to give my approval, but mostly I do it because what happens, you write the book and then you have to do all the rewrites, and then you have to do the copy editing. By the time you finish that process, you are so sick of that book. You never want to see it again. But by the time it comes out, it's been about 6 to 12 months later, you're going to go out and sell it. Like I'm doing now. Hello, buy my book. And you've forgotten all about it. So what I usually do is I listen to the audio, because then and by that time you've got over your kind of like, oh God, I hate this book. It was the worst book I ever read. And you get to the point where you think, oh, that wasn't that bad actually. And you listen to Cobner and you think, oh, it wasn't that bad. It's quite a good book. Thank God for that.
And when you're writing now, is it Cobner's voice you hear in your head?
Not for all the characters, but for Nightingale. Definitely for Nightingale, and also a little bit for Stephanopoulos. Okay. Particularly that kind of pained accent that he puts on. He goes, Peter, could we not, and that's like, I mean, actually, I've got to say, most of the things I get from Cobner are the people complaining about Peter's behaviour. So it's like, oh, Beverly, Nightingale, Stephanopoulos. Leslie.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically.
So Sarah has asked if Peter's heading to Scotland. I think there's been rumours that you've been seen in
Aberdeen.
Seen in Aberdeen. And she says if he does, Dr. Postmartin needs to check out the Magical Library at Abbotsford, the home of Sir Walter Scott, Because the River Tweed must surely have a deity.
I'm sure it is, but I'm in Aberdeen. So, the Don and the Dee, brook no rivals.
So is this definitely a hint that...
It's not a hint. I'm definitely setting a book in Aberdeen. And it's all Stuart McBride's fault, so...
Okay. So, and you were genuinely up there doing research recently,
Yeah,
then?
I've been up there about 12, 13 times now.
Wow. So you know London so well. Obviously, you're a Londoner.
Yeah.
You're very open about
Well,
your
I know
love
bits
of
London very well.
And then when books like this and Foxglove Summer, where they're set in other locations, did you do the same with Foxglove Summer?
Oh, yeah,
You
I went up. That was much harder.
Because I can never picture you in Herefordshire.
Well, that was the point, though, you see. I chose the most rural place I could choose. It wasn't like a Celtic area or the north.
Yeah.
See, because I wanted city versus country, not north versus south or Scotland versus London. I wanted city versus country and Herefordshire. And when I went there, I just looked at it, and also partly because the Rickman books are set there as well. See, so that was an influence. And I went there, and I went on Google Maps, and I found a village, and I found an interesting location, and I just picked out some locations, and I went and had a look at this place, and it was even better. I mean, it literally is the kind of landscape you think of when you think of rural, the idealised rural England, right?
I was just going to say that my friends and I did actually go on holiday there to try and find exactly some of the locations from the book.
Well, they're all real locations. I renamed the village because
yes. So we were scratching our heads, like looking at maps and trying to work out the geography from the description of the...
all the other places, Birch's Common, Ames Street, the pub, the walk, the croft, all those things exist and were very interesting. Poker's the wood is a real wood. I mean, I went there and I got the idea. There was this book by I can't remember, something Leather. Her surname is Leather, and she wrote it. It's the folklore of Herefordshire. And I went looking for places for fairies to be, and I found the wood that way. See, once I started looking at that, I started finding stuff, and then you just start building on stuff. It's the same thing I do in London, except it was in Herefordshire. The same thing I'm doing now in Aberdeen. You just find stuff and you just gather it up and then you publish it.
As your world increases in scope and characters, how do you keep track of it all and avoid continuity errors?
Well, I don't. So continuity errors are always turning up. No, I literally just recently paid someone, because I should have done it myself about 5 books ago, but didn't. I kept on putting it off, to go through all the books and make a note of who everyone is and what colour they have and things like that. And one day I will look at these notes.
I was imagining like a family tree on the wall of your home office or something.
If only it was just a family tree.
That's true.
It's like there's more than one family, you see.
I mean, even if you just take Beverly's family.
Yes, but fortunately they did a very, very good job of it, and it's all on a spreadsheet. So at some point when I do the next book set in London, I'm going to have to start, because that's when... At the moment, it's just Peter and Beverly and the twins and Dr. Waleed and like Scottish people, right?
So there's more license to be. You can invent new people.
I am inventing new people because we're up in a different location. When we go back to London, and I'm having to remember, Leeds and Sewell and Stephanopoulos, they fairly stuck in my brain. But when we have like all the other characters,
So Jane Amanda asks how you feel about people writing fan fiction about your characters.
I don't really think anything about fan fiction. I mean, fan fiction, the important thing for a writer is not to worry about these things. You don't read reviews and you don't read fan fiction. You're fine. You shouldn't read fan fiction for a couple of reasons. One, if they write something you don't like, you're going to get angry and it's just not very good for you. 2, you have to be able to say that you haven't stolen it, because like someone comes up with an idea and you come up with the same idea for the books. You have to be able to say with absolute clarity, right, I didn't steal that off this person, this poor fan fiction writer. I mean, you're within rights as a writer to nick ideas. If they're using your stuff, you're pretty much morally within your rights to nick it, but you shouldn't. And so therefore you shouldn't read fan fiction. Shouldn't read your own fan fiction. You can read other people's fan, and you can read fan fiction of other authors, but you shouldn't read fan fiction. So, I think people enjoy doing it. They should do what they enjoy. I'm not going to get in their way. as long as they don't try and...
But just don't send it to you.
Well, don't send it to me and don't monetize it. That's all I'm asking, because I have to get paid. Otherwise it's... And the multinationals out there would just love to find a way of not paying the authors. It's their dream. Every night, the corporate heads go to bed and dream of a world where ChatGPT and fans write all the products and they get all the profit. That's their big, happy dream.
Oh,
that they lull themselves to sleep at night.
Let's hope that never comes to pass.
I think they'll be replaced before I am, personally.
So Julia has said, with such dynamics happening in the UK's environments and politics, do you see it having an influence over how the series will play out?
Well, it always has an influence. I mean, it's set in the real world. It's set in the contemporary world. I mean, for a start, the Metropolitan Police reorganises every 6 months on a rolling basis, and I have to keep up with what everything's called. They're all called different things now, right? From what they were when I started the books. So I have to keep an eye on where I am in the time. But I've started having a very clear idea about which year each book takes place in, because otherwise you go mad trying to work out predicting the future. You go predict the future, it's a mug's game. So I know which year I am in, and sometimes I have references to things going on. Sometimes I don't, depending on what the story is, because I'm dealing with a kind of magical stuff. I don't actually have to worry too much about sort of a lot of contemporary politics, and some of it's too depressing and I can't be bothered. Like, you're not going to get a lot about Brexit in my books, right? Except that it's because it's just too depressing. I don't want to write about it.
It's funny, actually, now I think about it, I can't remember any reference to any politician or any, I mean... I
wouldn't do a specific, because it dates the book really quickly as well. I mean, nobody remembers that. They remember the pop stars. They won't remember the politicians. No one will remember who Boris Johnson is in 10 years' time, but they will get the reference about David Bowie.
Yeah. So Nightingale has a dream of potentially reopening the school, doesn't he? He has a retirement...
More as a college than as a school. I don't think he's planning to induct 12-year-olds in. I mean, for a start, can you imagine the health and safety implications? Okay.
Risk assessments for magical experiments.
Can you imagine the Department for Education coming around and saying, "You're going to do what?" Right? Fireballs? No fireballs. No. Because back when Nightingale was at school, it was perfectly acceptable for kids to walk around with real loaded rifles and do training with rifles and stuff like that. They used to, and do incredibly dangerous kind of sports and full contact kind of rugby and things like that. But so Nightingale's appalled by the restrictions on children these days. He just thinks we just way too coddle our children way too much.
Do you think he ever will open the college? Is it because?
He's definitely going to open the college sooner or later. I don't know if it's going to. I'm not planning to make a big thing in the books unless I come up with a really good story.
Right. Okay,
but it's something. These things are just organically happening, and sooner or later they will happening. But I don't know when they're going to happen. I mean, I don't have a plan. I don't have a plan like this book will be about Nightingale opening the college, and this book will be about Abigail blowing it up, and this book, whatever.
I think it's interesting with Nightingale because we all know that he's incredibly old for a human being. He's an unnatural lifespan.
Yeah.
And even he doesn't know what sustains his lifespan.
Yeah.
But I think when you first mentioned the thought of him retiring, I think a little chill on the back of my neck, the thought, because and I think Peter reacted in a similar way.
Yeah, but that's why he does it. Because he knows that Peter will always, will not think of himself. Right, so he has to make him think of somebody else. He has to the only thing that will curb Peter is a sense of responsibility. He can't necessarily risk his life if he's going to be the person in charge. And
he is incredibly reckless.
He's not reckless. He just does the right thing, regardless,
without pausing to think.
He pauses to think about it. That's what's terrifying. It's like he does think about it, and then he does it anyway. Right? If he did it without thinking, right, that would be one thing. Like Simon, who is Abigail's friend, has no fear. Oh, yes. Literally has no fear, and so therefore will not think. Because it just never occurs to him that anything bad will happen. You get people like that in history. You get people like Douglas Bader, who literally had no fear and couldn't understand fear in other people. He had real trouble with fear in other people because he personally had no fear and he didn't understand what fear was. And Simon is like that, but Nightingale actually does know what fear is. Nightingale's just personally very brave, and so is Peter. That's one of the reasons they get on, because in some ways Nightingale and Peter are very similar people. They're both kind of like they're both sort of like two versions of the British stiff upper lip, the posh one and the working class one. It's kind of like the same. It's the kind, and I've always thought of them like that, and they're also very similar in some ways, and very unsimilar in other ways, but very similar in some ways.
Because there's that chase in the Trocadero, isn't there?
Yes, chasing after the.
And I do actually, you're right, because Peter pauses and he says, I know this is going to hurt. You know, like he literally knows he's about to slam into some glass barrier, I think, or something. Or there was I don't know if it was the escalators. He ended up like falling down the escalators.
Yeah, and he does it, but he does a risk assessment. Nobody objects to his risk assessment. The problem is that having assessed the risk, he then does it anyway.
Carries on regardless.
No, the whole point of a risk assessment, Peter, is that you then don't do the thing that's incredibly risky, right? But he hasn't quite got the hang of that, so...
So the first book was published in 2011, First Rivers of London novel, and since then you've published 14 more books in the series and graphic novels.
9 novels, 4 novellas, and some graphic novels.
And a short story collection.
And the short story collection.
Do you have a favourite title?
Well, I'm very fond of Moon Over Soho because that's all I had at the beginning was the title. I didn't have a story, I just had the title. It's like the complete opposite of Rivers of London where I didn't have a title. I had a story and no title. In Moon Over Soho, it's called Moon Over Soho because that's such a cool title.
Such a cool cover as well.
Yeah, and then I went, I've got to do something, so obviously Soho. I thought, well, Moon Over Soho, that's either werewolves or jazz, and I went with werewolves. I went with jazz, not werewolves. So there you go.
Jazz vampires.
Yeah, well, that I wasn't planning jazz vampires. They just turned up. A lot of my stuff is done on the fly. I don't necessarily think to myself, this is what's going to happen, and this is going to happen, and these characters are going to happen. I mean, for example, Foxglove Summer, right? Originally, the idea was that the end of the story was going to be when they rescue the kids. But then Beverly turned up, and I wanted that whole sequence in the river. I thought, they can't do that while the kids are missing.
No, that would be wrong, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
You've got to be focused.
So they had to find the kids, right? Otherwise, I couldn't do that great scene in the river, right?
So the whole changeling element of the story came about to allow you to have Beverly and Peter and... Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, sort of. I mean, it's more complicated than that. It's not like the way you say it sound like that is like A equals B equals C equals D.
It's more nuanced.
What happens is you have a cloud of ideas, and as you write, they slowly come into focus, and then and then also, it's a really, it seemed to me a very clever thing to do to have like the kids found in the middle, right? Because you're expecting it to be the thing that happens at the end, but no, you find the kids in the middle. And that's just the beginning, and this is where the story really starts, and you have to find out why. Where did they go? What was the problem? Is that really the end of the story? And that's a much better story than just finishing with them finding the kids at the end.
So when you're starting, do you have the whole of the idea mapped out?
Varies from book to book.
Right, okay.
Some books I have nothing, except for the title.
Like Moon Over Soho.
Some books I have the end, but no beginning. Some books I have the beginning and end, no middle. Sometimes I have a middle and an end, but no beginning. I just generally I have a mood, a location, and a sense of something. And then you just kind of like start exploring. You start writing, and things start coming into focus. As you continue through the story, things come more and more into focus. And sometimes you're aiming at something, and sometimes you're just seeing where you go. And it just depends on the books, on the story. Some of them are really obvious. Like I knew in some books, I knew in Broken Homes, I knew what was happening at the end. And I knew what was happening in the middle. I wasn't really too sure what happened at the beginning. So, that was a completely different structure. I had to sit down and work out how to do that. Winter's Gift was planned out very carefully because I had the whole story.
Right.
I had the whole story for Winter's Gift, so I actually got a chance for a change to actually plan it out, which I don't normally do. What Abigail did that summer, I had a mood. I had the house and I had the mood, so I had to get her into the house and then I had to get her out of the house.
Right.
And so, that's the way that one went. And it varies from story to story. It would be nice if I had a system, but I don't. It just kind of like amalgamates.
And so do you have a favourite character?
Well, I mean, apart from Peter and Nightingale and Sewell and Stephanopoulos and Beverly and Abigail and I love them all. I love them all. Love all my characters, even the ones that no one likes.
Really? You've got characters no one likes?
Yeah, Zach. Nobody likes Zach. Everyone complains when Zach turns up in a book.
Oh, I like Zach.
Oh, okay. You're the one person who likes him. Everybody else goes, oh, God, not Zach again. But I really like Zach.
Yeah, no, I like the energy he brings.
Yeah, you know, I like that thing. He gave me a lot of insight. Zach was very useful for insight into how the Demi-Monde worked. Because once I invented him, once I made him a goblin boy, I called him Goblin Boy, once I made a background for him, and made him sort of half fade, then I had to come up with what he was like. And then that thing where he like just lusts after Leslie despite the fact that the face, right, as if it doesn't, there's no effect on him. Like that. Then I suddenly understood what it was the Demi-Monde was like. They don't look at the world the same way. They look at the world in a completely different way. Different things are important to them than from us. They have they're just as superficial, but just superficial about different things, right? And then, and suddenly I understood that, and suddenly that made, for me, the Demi-Monde much more real. So whatever else you think about Zach, he was my gateway into the wider Demi-Monde. So that was kind of useful. And
I might have been reading too much into it, but I thought it was really interesting that he's so attracted to Leslie, and like she's lost, at that in Broken Homes, particularly when they have like a particularly like kind of passionate, he's always coming, isn't he?
No, he's friends with benefits. Like,
he's friends with benefits. He drinks all the milk, eats all the bread, and stays. He's having like a feral teenager in some respects, isn't he?
Turn up and it's full of, they're full of the quiet people because they've all crashed there after a night out and things like that. There is quite a lot of the feral teenager about him. Kind of like, he's a little bit based on my brothers because I was much younger than my brothers, and every so often the living room used to fill up with these bodies in greatcoats, patchouli smelling, kind of great, huge. I was a little kid, and they were like massive, long-haired bodies that was the boys that all had long hair. In greatcoats, smelling of marijuana and patchouli oil, and you just come down. I'd want to watch Saturday morning television. I couldn't get into the bloody living room because it was full of
And undoubtedly the fridge would have been empty because they probably would have...
I have no idea. I wasn't in charge of the fridge. There would have been a fresh out of luck in our house. We did not have a lot of food in that house because we were not a well-off family. So, the fridge was never a cornucopia.
You can guarantee whatever's in your fridge, if Zach came round, it would be gone.
Zach would eat everything. He'd drink all the milk, eat all the Weetabix.
Probably pocket some knickknacks on the way out.
Yeah, he can't help himself. And you can't lock him out because he'll just go through the lock like butter. And he's a great character in some ways because he's quite sad in his own way. His inability to settle in any one place is quite sad. And
yeah, so he does. He still floats around, doesn't he? And appears.
The speculation is that it's part of his nature is that he can't settle. Part of his fey nature is that he can't settle. But that could just be an excuse. Who knows?
Who knows with the fae?
Who knows? I like them keep them nice and vague.
And it's interesting because thinking about Zach, with all of the characters, I have a very strong idea in my head about how they look. I said to you earlier, I think. When I always imagined that Cobner would look exactly like Peter Grant, but then when I looked at a picture of Cobner, Holbrook Smith, the actor, he doesn't look like Peter Grant, and I was a bit disappointed. I know the TV rights have been sold, so do you ever worry about a TV series being made, or would you? As an author, does it worry you? Because obviously you've written for Doctor Who.
No. I mean, I'm. There's two ways of approaching a TV rights. You selling a TV rights is take the money and run, or stick around and be disappointed. And I've gone for the stick around and be disappointed. So I am working with the production company. I have a lot of rights and things that I probably shouldn't have bothered trying to get, but I've got them anyway. But in the end, you see, it's about money. It's an expensive TV show. It's going to be about 10 million an episode, 8 to 10 million an episode, which is a lot.
Especially if they're starting with the first book.
Yeah, well, the whole point is that central London is just expensive to film in anyway, right?
Especially when you destroy huge chunks of it.
Well, ironically, that's probably not the expensive bit. The expensive bit is the riot in Bow Street is going to be expensive, right? Because that's like 200 extras in costume flying pyrotechnics at each other. That's costing money. That's like, 5 nights of night shooting in central London is not cheap. So, and the Jag is expensive because you've got to have like 5 vintage Jags because you have to have a hero Jag, 2 stunt Jags and a backup Jag just in case and a jag that you can film, like, this looks like a jag, but doesn't actually have to have any of the innards so that you can film people up against it and stuff. And that sort of thing is very expensive because, nobody wants to scratch up their jag because it's not pristine. So no vintage car jag owner is going to let us scratch up their jag. All those things are what pushes up the price. Building the inside of the Folly, we're going to have to at least build part of the inside of the Folly because I don't think the Reform Club is going to let us film in there day and night. So, all of these things add up. So it's very expensive. And the thing is, if you go to a broadcast and you say, "Can I have £10 million, please?" They get to have a say in what the final product looks like, right? 10 million buys you a lot of say, okay? So whatever I want, sooner or later, I'm going to have to compromise. And so no writer, especially novelist, likes to compromise.
Yeah, I suppose it's difficult, isn't it? Because you're not Peter Jackson here. He was able to write.
But even Peter Jackson had to compromise.
Yeah. I suppose they had the cost. They had a budget, didn't they?
Yeah, even Peter Jackson had to compromise. It doesn't look like it, but there was and a great deal of enthusiasm and people who were very excited and wanted to do it, right? And he compromised. When he had to, he compromised.
It's really exciting to hear that production's underway. Although,
well, no, production is not underway.
Okay.
Production is at the same stage that it's been for the last 12 years.
Okay.
Yeah, I call it Schrodinger's TV series.
It both exists and...
Yes, there's a box. Inside may or may not be a TV series. Or possibly an angry cat. It's very hard to tell sometimes.
So we think of you as a writer, obviously.
Obviously, well, yes.
But I'm also interested to learn a bit more about you as a reader. I wonder if you'd mind telling us a little bit more about what you read.
I read a tremendous amount of non-fiction for my work. And occasionally for fun. And sometimes it overlaps. I'm not going to say that doesn't. So I probably have one of the largest local history sections in London now in my house. Because I'm a compulsive buyer of books. I go, "Oh, trams, 1963 to 1967 in Hackney. I'll have that." Because I think, well, maybe I want trams in Hackney. Maybe I want to do a story about trams. Who knows, right? So when I'm actually writing, I read a lot of cozy crime because it doesn't interfere with anything. I can read it I say I read it. It's what I listen to in bed when I'm going to sleep. So I tend to find a cozy crime writer and then go through every single book they've ever written. And I'm reading a lot of Ellie Griffiths. So I've read everything she's written so far. And now I'm hanging around waiting for the next one like this. Next one, please. Although I do sit there going, how can the heroine get into trouble every single book? Right? I just would like her not to have a climax with her. Just, Ellie, she doesn't have to get in trouble every book, okay? Doesn't have to be life or death at the end of every book. That's what I say.
I have to confess, I've never read Ellie Griffiths.
Oh,
You've made me curious now. I'm going to have to go and borrow.
They're very good. They're very, very good books. What else? I read a lot of, science fiction, crime, fantasy, cozy fantasy. I'm very cozy. I think I'm just getting very kind of conservative in my old age. I don't want to be troubled.
Or frightened.
Yeah, well, no, you get all these books like, oh, yes, it's the end of the world. It's wonderfully bleak and depressing. I think I really just don't need to do that. If I want that, I can just turn on the news. And bleak and depressing I don't need that. But, I understand people like that. I liked that much more when I was younger. Now I don't. Now I don't like bleak and depressing. So I read happy, cozy, yay. I got low taste anyway.
So it's the final question. In False Values, there was a chase through the London Library.
Yes.
Bayfield Library becomes a refuge from the extreme weather and other things for Agent Kimberly Reynolds in Winter's Gifts.
Yes.
Now you visited Farnborough Library in Hampshire.
Ha!
How would you feel about setting a scene here?
Well, I love this. It's basically cut off from the entire town. It's like the most isolated library I've ever met. Okay, the only library more isolated than this is the one down in Gillingham, right? Which is what do you call it? Oh, I've forgotten. Medway Library, which is down in its own little park by the which is a nice setting. This, when I looked up on Google Maps to see how to get here, I was going, you got to walk across the roundabout. This is like, well, they weren't really thinking accessibility when they did this one, were they? Like, But it's a very interesting. It's a 60s building. I mean, you can just walk in and go, oh look, it's 50s, 60s building. From that big period when everyone, like the council, was throwing up stuff all over the place. It's very nice, very robust, well built, big, a lot of books, which is what I like in a library. Got a coffee shop, which is also what I like in a library. Coffee and books. You can't go much wrong with coffee and books. I don't know. I've never thought of coming this end to do a story.
It's quite an unremarkable part of the country, I suppose, Hampshire, isn't it?
You know, it's. You never know where you're going to end up. For all I know, next week, oh, Farnborough, yes.
Peter's car might break down in Farnborough, you never know.
I'm fairly certain. My brain is going that there's quite an aviation history around here.
There is a huge history. So this is the home of aviation.
Yes, this is the home of aviation. I think also the Farnborough testing ground is, or where the
wind tunnels, and the balloons, the World War I balloons. So you never know, Nightingale might be able to...
And isn't the air crash investigation team based out of here?
They are.
Yes. See, so that actually, if anything else, that will drag me down here. I'm bound to blow up a plane sooner or later. Actually, that's a really good idea. Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think Farnborough, I mean, at least as the home of the aviation.
Well, we will always make you a coffee and make you welcome if you decide to come back to Farnborough Library for more research.
Well, I'm sure you'll have me back.
Oh, definitely. Thank you so much.
Publicity hound that I am.
Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
It's been an absolute joy to talk to you about the books. So thank you.
Yes.